I have to get my side into this too.
They got me interested in trying it out, and the first time out, it doesn't work anymore, and there's no address I can write to, so I have no way of contacting my daughter.
Thomas Markle has just unleashed something so earth-shaking that the internet didn't just react, it erupted. I mean it. The man didn't make a statement. He pulled the pin and rolled a grenade straight into Meghan Markle's perfectly curated fairy tale life. And the way he delivered it, raw, steady, like someone who's been swallowing the truth for years, felt less like an interview and more like a confession he could no longer keep buried. He isn't hinting. No. He's boldly declaring that. His daughter's so-called official timeline doesn't line up, not even close. And just when you think this chaos can't get any more unhinged, out comes this ancient copy of 17 magazine from 1997, stumbling out of the shadows like a forgotten relic clutching a smoking hot clue. What does it reveal? Meghan Markle, age 21. 21. Meanwhile, every public record insists she should have been 15. 15. Not a typo, not a printing error, a completely different reality. And once you see that number, that single detail, you feel the ground shift. Because it warps everything. Her rise in Hollywood, her crafted public image, even her royal metamorphosis. It forces you to stop and ask, what exactly have we been looking at all this time? Because the deeper you trace these threads, the more the fairy tale unravels into a jigsaw where nothing fits no matter how hard you force the pieces. Before I even dive into the madness, if you're watching right now, understand this. The clues I'm about to lay out have been sitting in the open for years, hiding in plain sight, waiting, and somehow no one bothered to connect them until this moment. So buckle in, because once these dots link, there's no going back. You won't be able to unsee any of it. And with that, we go straight to Thomas Markle, the father, the storm's epicenter, the man whose voice sounds less like scandal and more like someone trying to unload a truth he's terrified will die with him if he stays silent. Little nobody saw coming. What if the headlines you've been scrolling through missed the juiciest? You know how most fathers instantly soften the second they mention their daughters? That warm grin, that wistful tone, those gentle little boasts. Yeah, erase all of that. When Thomas speaks about Meghan, there's a heaviness in his voice, like a man caught between affection, remorse, and a desperate need to finally set the record straight. He's not furious. He's not vindictive. He's worn down from years of being branded the bad guy while watching a publicly crafted version of his daughter's life that clashes with the one he actually witnessed. He describes her childhood with razor-sharp clarity, the late-night rehearsals, the spark she carried even as a young kid, the fierce determination that could bulldoze obstacles. He recalls the school productions, the graduation ceremonies, all those small but permanent moments that lock themselves into a parent's mind. Those aren't memories that fade. Those are the mile markers of a real life lived. But when Meghan suddenly catapulted from cable show actress to global royalty, Thomas started spotting fractures, missing pieces, altered timelines, stories that didn't mirror the girl he raised. And you can almost hear the unspoken question running through him. Why does her story now look nothing like the one I lived?
Story than we've been told. Stay with us as we uncover the explosive truth behind.
We're talking foundational moments here, not hazy, not blurry. Major milestones. Graduation years, early acting breakthroughs, the age she was when she first started booking real roles. These aren't the kind of details a parent accidentally scrambles. These are the headline memories, the ones you celebrate, frame, cry over, replay for decades. And yet Thomas insists the public timeline doesn't sync with the life he witnessed. The math feels wrong. The ages don't align. It's like someone rewrote his daughter's biography, but shuffled the pieces in the process. And say whatever you want about the man, he's not some anonymous commenter making noise online. He's not a gossip columnist desperate for clicks. He's the dad who held her baby pictures, the one who drove her home from school, the man who saw every stage of her becoming. He doesn't need documents. He carries the
Off to
truth in lived
Rosarito,
experience.
Mexico, where we're joined by our friend Thomas Markle, the father.
So when he says the timeline doesn't line up, when he implies her documented birth year might have been altered somewhere along the way, those words land with a weight no online conspiracy ever could. He chooses each sentence with surgical precision, like a man fully aware that what he's revealing isn't small. This isn't a clerical slip. This isn't a harmless oversight. This is a fracture running straight through the origin story the world has been fed about Meghan Markle for years. And honestly, it was the moment everything shifted, the instant people paused and whispered, "Hold on, what?" Because gossip blogs speculating is one thing, but a father stepping forward and saying, "Wait, that's not the version I lived," is something entirely different.
Featuring an extraordinary message from her.
And then comes the magazine shockwave. Out of absolutely nowhere, we're yanked back to March 1997. 17 magazine, the ultimate 90s teenage Bible. Shiny pages, neon headlines, pop idol obsessions, fashion hacks, the whole nostalgic universe. And buried on page 90, sitting there as casually as a grocery receipt, is Meghan Markle's name. Age, 21. At first glance, it feels harmless. Just another aspiring face trying to find her place in the industry. But the second you pause, the moment you really examine it, the entire picture turns on its head. Because if Meghan was truly born on August 4th, 1981, then in March 1997, she wouldn't be anywhere near 21. She'd be 15, a freshman navigating high school hallways. Yet here we have a published, printed, preserved magazine declaring her as 21. And that's not a smudge, not a slip-up. That's a 6-year difference. 6 years carved clean out of the timeline. Interview 5, February 5th, 09. I'm convinced she knew exactly what she was doing. Not 21. That single detail says it all. This wasn't a misread digit or a printing slip. This was an entirely different age. One that rewrites her Hollywood beginnings, shifts her career origin story, and even reshapes the timeline of how she eventually crossed paths with Prince Harry. And let's be clear, this wasn't scraped off some sketchy website. This was a national magazine, editors, proofers, fact-checkers, the whole machinery. That number didn't materialize out of thin air. It was supplied by someone. And the moment you realize that, the real question hits. Who provided it? Because if 17 magazine got that age directly from Meghan or the people around her at the time, then 21 wasn't an error. It was the age they deliberately handed
in
over.
a new world and decided that she doesn't have any family.
I believe she had a...
And if you even entertain the possibility that the magazine's number was right, the entire story turns inside out. Meghan wouldn't have been some bright-eyed 20-something hustling through early Hollywood. She would have been nearing 30 when her real break started. A totally different narrative, one the public was never handed. People love brushing it off with, magazines mess up. But this wasn't a stray caption under a photo. It was a curated list. Names paired with ages, something that had to be submitted, checked, approved. And that leads us straight into the collision of two timelines. The version the world repeats and the version that snaps everything apart. If 17 magazine got it right, why did the official story morph later? Why does the math twist so violently depending on which timeline you follow? One paints her as a young, up-and-coming actress in. The other shows a woman several years older trying to claw her way into an industry obsessed with youth. And that 6-year gap might seem small until you start aligning the milestones, graduation years, first editions, earliest roles. Nothing falls where it should. It's like trying to force together puzzle pieces from entirely different sets. And that drags us straight into the biggest question of all. Which timeline is the truth? Because they can't both be real. Version 1. Meghan, born August 4th, 1981. The date broadcast everywhere, shaping her entire public persona. Version 2. The magazine listing, March 1997, age 21, which would plant her birth year somewhere around 1975 or 1976. That's a massive jump, large enough to rewrite her career arc, her age at every pivotal moment, the year she met Harry, even how old she would have been during her royal pregnancies. Now you
Father
see why
that
the internet
won't back
is spiraling.
down. Once a devoted father who proudly supported his daughter.
Because if she were actually born in the mid-70s, she wasn't a 36-year-old actress stepping into palace life. She'd have been in her early 40s, maybe beyond that. And that doesn't just tweak the narrative. It detonates the fairy tale of a young modern duchess, which is where everything shifts from strange to wait, what else doesn't line up? Because next comes the birth timeline, Archie's arrival, and this is where the chaos deepens. Just when you think the age discrepancy is the peak of the madness, the story swerves into an entirely new category. The moment Harry's account of Archie's birth enters the conversation, specifically what he wrote in spare versus what medical experts say is physically possible, it feels like stepping into a story where the puzzle pieces actively refuse to connect no matter how hard you try. According to Harry, Meghan had this tranquil, serene, practically luxury spa birth experience at Portland Hospital, complete with not one but 2 epidurals. And then comes the part that makes medical professionals literally stare in disbelief. They were back at Frogmore Cottage within 2 hours. A 2-hour turnaround, 2 epidurals, a top-security hospital, and a new mother supposedly bouncing back like she'd just finished a yoga session, not given birth. Anyone who's lived through labor or even stood near someone who has immediately went, hold on, what? And then comes the clock. Oh, that infamous 2-hour clock. Let's break it down exactly the way medical staff did. The drive from Portland Hospital to Frogmore Cottage runs close to an hour on a good day, which means everything else, the delivery, the initial recovery window, cleanup, monitoring, discharge checks, vital assessments, paperwork, dressing, gathering belongings, getting to the car, all had to be squeezed into a single hour. Because if she were actually born in the mid-70s, she wasn't a 36-year-old actress stepping into palace life. She'd have been in her early 40s, maybe beyond that. And that doesn't just tweak the narrative. It detonates the fairy tale of a young modern duchess, which is where everything shifts from strange to wait, what else doesn't line up? Because next comes the birth timeline, Archie's arrival, and this is where the chaos deepens. Just when you think the age discrepancy is the peak of the madness, the story swerves into an entirely new category. The moment Harry's account of Archie's birth enters the conversation, specifically what he wrote in spare versus what medical experts say is physically possible, it feels like stepping into a story where the puzzle pieces actively refuse to connect no matter how hard you try. According to Harry, Meghan had this tranquil, serene, practically luxury spa birth experience at Portland Hospital, complete with not one but 2 epidurals. And then comes the part that makes medical professionals literally stare in disbelief. They were back at Frogmore Cottage within 2 hours. A 2-hour turnaround, 2 epidurals, a top-security hospital, and a new mother supposedly bouncing back like she'd just finished a yoga session, not given birth. Anyone who's lived through labor or even stood near someone who has immediately went, hold on, what? And then comes the clock. Oh, that infamous 2-hour clock. Let's break it down exactly the way medical staff did. The drive from Portland Hospital to Frogmore Cottage runs close to an hour on a good day, which means everything else, the delivery, the initial recovery window, cleanup, monitoring, discharge checks, vital assessments, paperwork, dressing, gathering belongings, getting to the car, all had to be squeezed into a single hour. And when you layer that over the earlier timeline contradictions, you can feel this creeping pattern forming, small oddities swelling into larger gaps, bigger gaps turning into massive question marks. And then, like a boomerang, everything swings right back to Thomas Markle, the father repeating quietly but steadily, "This isn't the timeline I lived." And suddenly, you can't help wondering, how many details were edited for presentation? How many pieces were trimmed, reorganized, or rewritten entirely to fit a cleaner public story? Because here's the unpolished truth. When you marry into a dynasty as enormous and globally scrutinized as the British royal family, every detail becomes part of the brand. Everything gets curated, everything gets managed. Ages matter, timelines matter, narratives matter, and any detail that doesn't fit the pristine storyline becomes a liability. The pressure to keep the picture flawless is enormous. And when cracks show, the instinct is to seal them instantly. A 6-year age discrepancy in a magazine? Smooth it over. A birth account that jars with medical reality? Make it sound magical. A father questioning the timeline? Paint him as unreliable. But reality is stubborn. Printed magazines don't alter themselves. Hospital procedures don't shift overnight. A father's memory doesn't erase itself because a new narrative trends better. And that's where the tension of this entire story lives, in the space between what can be proven and what has been presented.